a double tap enough of a 380 or 32 ACP pocket pistol? And today I have some double tap ammunition with our solid copper hollow points. So our 380 ACP is a 80 grain double tap lead free solid copper hollow point rated at 1050 feet per second from a Glock 42. Says that right on the box. And our 32 ACP is a 60 grain double tap lead free solid copper hollow point rated at 960 feet per second from a 2.5 inch barrel is what it says. And I'm betting that's from that Kel-Tec P32 I got there, because that specifically has a 2.5 inch barrel. So I'm going to use my Ruger LCP in 380 and my Kel-Tec P32 in 32 ACP to do this test. So very interesting here. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy you get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of these are. No fabric in the way they could potentially clog a hollow point or anything like that. And see if we get any expansion. I think that's particularly important with ammo like this out of such short barrels, to see if we actually can get any expansion with plain gel. Because if it fails through our real world simulation I'm going to do after that, at least we can see what they're supposed to look like. And then after our plain gel shot, I'm going to do our real world simulation. 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiber board that represents hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. In this format, with the rib simulation and everything in there, this makes this roughly a half representation of the density of flesh. So if you were to get like 12 inches in this particular test with the MDF in place, that's going to be more like 6 inches in a real living target. So just keep that in mind. So we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot, then our real world simulation shot, and then I will see what kind of shootability I can get with these, what kind of practical accuracy I can get on steel. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 380 ACP 80 grain solid copper hollow point. This is rated at 1050 feet per second through a 3 1/4 inch barrel. I'm going to use my 2 3/4, so a 1/2 inch shorter barrel. So let's see how close we get to that 1050 feet per second out of this little LCP here. $11.36. 11.42. Failure to extract with that, and that's pretty common with ammo this hot through this little pistol. I typically don't run ammo that hot. Keep going. 11.38. 11.53. Another failure to extract, and I'm going to count that as all because of that power level in this pistol. Anything that's that hot doesn't run in this particular pistol. And another one, 11.55, and that's all on account of it being too hot. So it's not a failure on the ammo, but it is a failure on this particular system. I was not expecting to be that much over the rated velocity and cause those issues. I've tested a lot of ammo with this. I actually also have a replaced recoil spring there, and it handles a little bit hotter ammo than typical, but going this hot, just too hot. Now our 32 ACP 60 grain rated at 960 feet per second through this particular barrel length, and the overall length of these does seem like that they had some thought into that to make sure that we don't get rim lock, because they are pushed out a little bit further than typical, so those seem to be loaded right. So same barrel length that it's rated from, rated at 960. Let's see how close we get to 960 from our little P32 here. 1052, 1008, 1003, 1007, 962. So every single one of those was above rated velocity. The consistency wasn't great, but being that every single shot was above the rated velocity, I can't call that a failure. Recoil on this was a little more manageable than the 380. Not by a lot, but a little bit. So this is just a little bit more shootable out of a pistol this size. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot, no fabric in the way that could potentially clog a hollow point, no rib simulation that can slow down the penetration. So hopefully we can get some hollow point expansion with these from these little short barrels. So 380 ACP first. Let's see how this does. Another malfunction. And I am getting close on those gel blocks so I can make accurate shots without without intersecting those paths. So 32 ACP. Let's see how this does. Let's go take a look. All right, interesting. Even at those velocity numbers, that 380 did not expand. There's not a lot of energy dump in that first 3-inch piece, but our 32 did expand. 32 on top, 380 on the bottom there. That is very interesting. I did notice the bullet designs were slightly different from bullet to bullet. It looked like the 32 had a little bit larger opening for a hollow cavity. But yeah, I mean, overall the damage is pretty good with the 380. It just didn't expand. The bullet's backwards, so a lot of that damage is tumbling. With our 32, that straight up just expanded. The penetration's kind of low with our 32 though. But with our 380, we got adequate penetration of about 14 inches, but it just didn't expand. With our 32, we got 10 inches and pretty good expansion. It's very interesting overall. Let's put on our fabric, put in our rib simulation, and see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation: 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back. You got to remember, clear ballistics in this format with the rib simulation is about a half representation of the density of flesh. So whatever you see in there is going to be about half that far in a real living target. So let's see what we get here with our 380 ACP. All right. Now let's hit that with our 32 ACP. Let's go take a look. All right, so essentially the same thing going on here, except a little bit less penetration with both. So looking at a rib simulation, clearly our 380 tumbled through. That's the shape of the bullet tumbling that way. So it's tumbling before it even hit this. And the first 3-inch piece, you can see there that, you know, there's not a whole lot of damage. With the 32, there's a ton of damage, and it clearly is expanding before it hit that rib simulation. And we can tell by looking at that rib simulation. So neither of these really performed ideally. However, I'm going to say I think the 32 performed better. So looking at our 380, we did get adequate penetration of about 12.5 inches, but it just didn't expand. Now with our 32, what we got here is we only got about 8 inches of penetration, but it did expand really well. So looking at this ammo, at least the 32 did kind of perform as advertised as far as getting expansion. It's just that the penetration's kind of low. But that's to be expected for a hollow point 32. And I think that, you know, for the hollow point, it did open up beautifully. So I would say the 32 is a little bit better round than the 380, but the 380 is going to penetrate more adequately. Now, here's my opinion on this. 12 inches, you know, that made it to 12 inches with both those 380 shots. And the 12 inches is quoted a lot. People say, well, the FBI or the IWBA and all these different agencies say, well, you need 12 inches. But that's calculating going through an arm from the side, a side shot, getting 12 inches, equaling roughly 6-8 inches in a real living target, going through the arm bones and everything. And with that 12 inches, that should be enough in a real living target to hit something vital. What you actually need is more like what this will give, 4 inches or so on a front on shot. Now, this would be absolutely terrible for law enforcement because it would fail a lot, but when you're talking a regular citizen that's not taking those side shots at someone running from them and shooting back at them, that's plenty of penetration. So it's really hard to call this here. I would say the terminal performance is about equal in a way, but at least our 32 got some expansion, so interesting. Let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets, and then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of accuracy I can get on target. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Here's our 32 ACP, and here's our 380 ACP. So I figured I'd just pull out a couple of these rounds to compare them to their unfired state here, compared to the bullets. So here's our 380. There's our plain gel 380 bullet. You can almost see a little bit where it's starting to crack apart those petals. So I wanted to try to expand, but it just couldn't quite do it. And here's our 32 unfired bullet. And expanded out beautifully. And these cartridges are nice and long, so we're not dealing with any type of rim lock issues. So these were actually, seem to be tailored towards, or actually tailored to that P32. So pretty good performance there. Just a little bit under penetrating. Now going through our real world simulation, 380, 32. We started to want to get some expansion with our 380. We compare it to the unfired round there. And you can see separation of where those petals are, but it just didn't want to expand. Now with our 32 here, you know, the petals peeled back a little bit further than what they did through the plain gel here, which is pretty typical, but pretty good overall. So looking at this 32, 380, obviously, you know, just the terminal performance seems to be a little bit better with 32, but you know, the 380 did some good damage in there. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, I came right back to 40 yards rather than up close like typical. And the reason for that is because there's just no way that I can get a fair comparison of this ammo, how it shoots rapidly when this 380 is going to malfunction all the time. You know, I picked the ammo for this specifically knowing the limitations of this pistol, and I know that anytime I see a rated energy that is over 200 foot-pounds, it's not going to run in this pistol. You know, this pistol has been very reliable since I replaced the recoil spring about a year ago. Runs a lot of stuff, but if you go over 200 foot-pounds, it just isn't going to run. This ammo was rated at less than 200 foot-pounds, so I bought it thinking it would run fine, but it's way above the rate of velocity and isn't going to run fine in this particular pistol. So I'm just going to fire slow from 40 yards just for fun, just to see if I can hit the target with these little pocket pistols for no other reason than just for fun. So let's see what I can do here with our 380 ACP from 40 yards. So I know what people are going to say, well, why didn't you fix that? You know, I've watched your videos and it's jammed for years, and I did. Everything pre like 2024, a lot of malfunctions, and I cleared up the issue. I replaced all the parts that needed to be replaced, shot a whole bunch of rounds to it, no problems. But today, you bring out ammo that hot, what's going to happen? So 32 ACP. Let's see if I can do any better with this. Now I will have to take the glove off. This particular trigger guard is too small to fit that glove. It barely fits my finger as it is. 32 ACP. See how this shoots. Not good. So I had to aim left and high for that to actually hit. So interesting here. So most of the time people would say if you get over the rated velocity, that's always a positive thing. Well, I can't say that this time, because you know, I was calculating that performance of that 380, how it was going to run in my particular pistol based on the rated velocity. And it was like over 100 feet per second above the rated velocity. It was like 100 feet per second higher than the rated out of a barrel that's a ½ inch shorter than what they show. So likely if I had a longer barrel, instead of 1050, we're going to be like at 1200 feet per second. So that really pushes the limitations of a pocket pistol. Sure, this stuff would run fine out of my Shield EZ or any other larger 380 pistol, but you know, I went based on what it said, and it's clearly over the limits for that particular pistol. Now the 32, that ran just fine. Now looking at the terminal performance, even with all that extra velocity, no expansion with the 380, that was weird. That was weird. So I would say overall, technically, I'm gonna call the 380 a failed just because it didn't expand, and it didn't expand with excessive velocity. It penetrated fine, but I mean, I could do that with full metal jacket and just have a little extra penetration. It wouldn't be much different than this. The 32, decent. I'm gonna say it's decent. It was above rated velocity. It didn't really affect anything though, just because 32s are already pretty low powered, and it's been known for a long time that little pocket pistols in 32 tend to be a little more reliable than pocket pistols in 380. So overall, it was reliable, wasn't too excessive on the recoil. We got expansion. So looking at that, I would say it's acceptable because it is pretty standard that you're gonna get below your minimum 12-inch penetration with an expanded hollow point in the 32 most of the time. So, you know, I can't say though in the real world one would be better than the other, except for in a little itty bitty pistol, I would not run 380 this hot. So interesting. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like. And thanks for watching.